Hey, all you beautiful people. My name is Nick Holman. I'm a professional artist, and welcome to my first YouTube video. I'm just so excited about this. So today we're focusing on watercolors, and we're doing realistic eyes. And in spirit of that, I did a light daytime makeup to accentuate my eyes. So let's get into it. Let's paint. All right, let's get into it. If you can't tell, I'm very excited. Welcome to my first YouTube video. And first and foremost, this video is not necessarily about drawing eyes. It's going to be more about painting them. But if you feel like you need to practice eyes, do yourself a favor and go ahead and fill like 5 sketchbook pages of eyes. Like do some for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 30 seconds, a minute, and so on, and really begin to understand the structure of the eyes, the anatomy of the eyes, how the planes shift and values shift. I think that'll help you immensely, as that does apply to everything else. Drawing is just super important. So for these watercolor eyes, I do like to start off with a nice watered down yellow, and I put that wet on dry, so basically wet paint on dry paper. And then once that is wet, I continue to just add values, color shifts, all of that stuff while it's still wet, because I want these colors to get to know each other. I want them to mingle, and it creates these beautiful, soft transitions that I just don't think any other paint is capable of creating. And for this skin tone, it's on the darker side. So I'm using a little more of yellow ochres, a little burnt sienna, and then I even throw in a little blues to accentuate the shadows. I really like to put down wet on dry in like these little blobs. And then with a clean, damp brush, not soaking wet, just damp, I soften those edges to where I need them to go. But I am the type of watercolor painter that I'm not really afraid of those watercolor lines per se. I think those are important in making watercolor. I think those moments of the paint doing whatever it wants to do, the water doing whatever it wants to do, I think that's important to let happen. Now for the iris, I'm putting down just a flat layer of a brighter color. And then while that is still wet is when you can add in the other colors that exist in the iris. And what's really cool about letting the water do its job is that this will automatically look like a natural iris because of how the colors will blend and get to know each other and mingle. So then you start to add in the shadows. And it is also important to note that drying these layers in between is crucial. You don't want to put down a new layer that needs to be separate from the previous layer, but the previous layer is still wet. That just doesn't work. So I always have a little dryer handy because I don't want to watch the paint dry. I mean, come on, I just want to paint. So again, throwing down more shadows, really trying to capture the essence of this person and, the things that they might have seen. And as far as eyelashes go, it is super important that you really observe your reference photo and really pay attention to where the eyelashes are going, what direction they're going, because these eyelashes are wrapped around a circle. So they're going to be pointing in so many different directions. And I think if you get your eyelashes correct, that really brings your painting to another level. And I love adding highlights to hairs because hairs are shiny. And I think that little detail really ups your painting game. For the next eye, again, I am going to start with a yellow. This one's a little more orange, but again, it's so watered down that it's almost white. So with watercolor, I'm thinking, okay, what I'm putting down right now will be my brightest stuff. And then I dry my brush off and I pull up paint with a dry brush rather than a paper towel. I think you have more control. I'm also using Sable natural brushes. So the water absorption is significantly more than synthetic brushes. I have synthetic brushes, I use synthetic brushes, but when it comes to watercolor, I just haven't really found anything that compares to natural fur or hair. Obviously, I know, it's bittersweet working with natural brushes, but I've had them forever, and, I just use these for watercolor, really. They're really soft. They're just so absorbent. So, again, with these details, I do the crease of the eyelid, a darker value, but later on, I'll go even darker. So, watercolor is, I think, forgiving, because if you're going lighter, you have so much room to fix your mistakes and just keep going darker. Like for this iris, I put down that really intense blue, but now with all of these other dark shades going on top of it, and then when I put in the pupil, it doesn't really look like that intense. It looks natural. It looks like that could be a real eye. You never know. This person did have a little more red hues in the white of their eye. I forget what that's, scleris? I don't know what that's called. And then something about that moment when you put in the pupil, it just like, bam, it really comes together. So I'm throwing in more shadows. I'm being a little more gestural with these, and I don't know, just really laying down paint. I soften it a little bit, but also I live for those moments where you can see the watercolor separation, the watercolor drying. I think that's why we all have come to love watercolor, because it is a paint medium that stands in its own. I mean, opaque mediums like gouache, acrylic, oil, casein, you name it, they kind of have similar qualities. Except gouache, that's a little different, but still it's opaque. And then when it comes to watercolor, I just think nothing else compares. So letting the paint do its thing and understanding that you are painting with tinted water, I think the sooner you can fully accept that, the better your paintings will be. Because like those moments where the water is doing its thing are just so beautiful. Now, I do switch between a really fat round brush. The number's worn off, so I can't really give you a size. It's probably like a 12 or something. I paint with that as long as I can. I think in any painting, it is best to start with your biggest brush and paint with that as long as you can, and then slowly get smaller and smaller. Because if you paint an entire painting with a small brush, well, then you're just like worrying about details, and you're not really getting like the gesture or the character or like the values of your scene or what's going on. Again, now that I'm adding the highlights to those eyelashes, I really think it just adds something just really, really beautiful to the eye. I think it's a detail that maybe people overlook, and if anything, I can like bring your attention to that. For the last and final eye, I decided to go with an old person because this person had such like deep set eyes, so many intense shadows. There was like no yellow in their skin, so I started with like a reddish pink, and then I was just obsessed with the shadow shapes and the creases. And then when you think about like your subject, it's like this person has seen so much, felt so much, and this eye and person has been through so much. Like, I'm painting how we see the world. I'm painting how you're watching this video. I'm painting how I put down paint. So I don't know. I just think it's an intimate moment there when you can think about your subject and what they've seen, what they've been through. I was really just obsessed with the colors in this eye. The whites of the eye were super dark and like yellowish, which I think that just happens when you get older. I don't know. This person didn't really have any eyelashes, so you'll notice I don't add those. And then the highlights, there were like 4 really distinct, beautiful highlights. And like, let's all be honest, when you add those, this really comes together. So this is my first YouTube video, my first tutorial. I hope you learned a lot. I hope you feel inspired. I hope you feel empowered. And I am so open to feedback, criticism, good, bad. I want to hear it. Also, I turned all of these eyeballs into a sticker pack, so I will link that down below. And until the next video, happy painting. Cue jazz music.